No. All righty. Hello, everybody. We'll just give everyone a second to get in, get comfy, and we will get started. This is my standard time where I'm like, next month I'm going to have music, so this is less awkward. And I say this every month for a year now. Next month is the month. So we'll see. Who am I kidding? That's not going to happen. But while we're getting everyone in, a couple housekeeping for you newbies out there. Welcome to our monthly chat. What we do here is I try and poke and prod you guys with questions for our panelists for this week. Keep it as interactive as possible. Comments into the chat. That's what we're here for. Sharing is caring. So we're here to share experiences, stories, horror stories, love stories, and everything in between. So so that's that. A huge thank you to Marketing Copilot, who is sponsoring us today. They're the ones who keep us going every month and allow us to keep our website alive, because this is really just a volunteer thing. So thank you so much for them for allowing us to be a part of this community. And
the gasp, I gasped.
Sorry? Oh, please keep yourself on mute. This is being recorded, so that'll go up on the website later. And Michelle, who is one of our partners in crime here at the Channel Marketing Academy, will be monitoring the chat. So if I forget any questions, she will shout out, or you can just show us your lovely faces and come off of mute, and you can ask the question as well. No stress there. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome these three wonderful ladies to the chat. I know I say every month, like I'm super excited, but this month I know all three of them personally, and this is going to be a really, really cool session. So start with Jem. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tanya, and for the rest of the group. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Jem Boyd. I am the Director of Marketing at Pearsoft. We do AP automation and procurement automation for a variety of ERPs, including Microsoft Dynamics and D365 as well. I have been with Pearsoft now for close to 2 years, but prior to that, I worked for a VAR. So I've been in the channel space for Dynamics for a really long time, and I love how it is just such a community of people who have always kind of hung out in the space, and I just really appreciate that about this group is everyone kind of gets to be a lifer with the channel, and so that's always fun to see the same faces and get to kind of grow as I grow out the career and experience that we've had. So excited to be here today to talk about ABM. I'll go ahead and popcorn over to Natalie.
Great, thank you. Excited to be here. So my name is Natalie Jackson. I am the Director of Demand Generation at CBiz. We are professional services. I think a lot of people know us as an accounting firm. We also have benefits and insurance and lots of other things. We have many, many, many offerings here at CBiz, which is actually really exciting and makes this topic super relevant and super fun. But yeah, I'm also the co-host of the podcast Humans of Email, which hopefully will get kicked back up shortly. Hopefully, and excited to be here and talk about this topic. I think it's definitely the next evolution of marketing.
And Clay, we grew up together in the community. Speaking of lifers, so why don't you introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, I do love it. It really is a place where we're all community and we've grown up together. So hello, everyone. Calais Lang. I am at Avalara and I run our ABM for our core market segment. Of course, Avalara, our mission is to help get businesses of all sizes their tax compliance done right. It's just not a tagline. It is our promise to customers. So yes, I have been at Avalara for 10 years now and have been in the Microsoft Dynamics community for 16 years, and it has been phenomenal. And so happy to have been able to, as Tanya said, grow up side by side with some amazing individuals.
Cool. Yeah. So Calais, we both started when we were 14. About yeah.
Was it 14? Was it maybe 4? I mean,
Yeah. Our secret's safe now all over the internet, but you know, that's okay. All right, so without further ado, we're going into my life story. Let's get into the topic at hand. So everyone is at a different stage or of their ABM site, of their life cycle, or thinking about it or into it, like full blown. So these are ladies who know their stuff, have been doing it, and are going to tell us about how they've evolved with it. So Natalie, if you can start by just describing a recent campaign you did. Let us dream a little bit before we get into the nitty gritties and the backstory. Like let us have a little.
I mean, I've had lots of dreams for like a long time. Like what I'd like to do. I remember like 7 years ago, we put together an account-based marketing campaign at a marketing agency where I worked, where like one component of it, like there was a ton of digital to it, but like one component of it is like we actually potted up a bunch of plants and then had our intern like hand deliver them to like the key contact in all of these accounts. Anyway, I haven't been doing that lately. That was a lot of fun, trying to use more technology and fewer interns. We're currently in the process of like getting to know our brand new shiny, sparkly account-based marketing software tool. And there's enough, I think, that I know we're going to get into later, that has changed about how account-based marketing has like pushed us into a different type of conversation about reporting and metrics, that I really wanted to be deliberate about how we ran our first official campaign. And so what we're doing is just to like proof of putting the whole thing and make sure it's really like obvious and clear, is we're treating it like a science project, like a 7th grade science project. So we took like a target group of accounts, this big bucket of accounts that we knew would be a good fit for us, and we totally randomly split them in half. And we created one half that was called control and the other half that was called targeted. And the only variable that we changed is that one receives ads in our new account-based marketing platform and the other doesn't. And our vision is that at the end of 6 months, we're going to take a look and see like, what did that tell us beyond just the thing that marketers tend to get focused on, not saying they shouldn't. Remember, my title is demand generation, which is opportunities, right? Opportunities are obviously very important, but like sometimes if all you're focused on is like net new lead and generation or like opportunity generation, you're missing the bigger story of like impact on the overall sales cycle. Like, is there a story to be told around like the shortening of the sales cycle or the number of wins versus a campaign that didn't have ads, right? So there's lots of different ways that I think we as marketers can impact the sales cycle, and we just haven't had a good way to prove that. So that's what I'm working on for the campaign I'm currently working on, is just making sure that 7th grade science is still applicable.
Well, I say often on this chat, marketing is a science and an art, and I think you just proved it there. So those 7th grade science and math skills do come in handy. And I think your little plan, like, don't knock it. Like, we all have to start somewhere, and that vision of, okay, we're starting small and it will be manual. It's normal too, and like, you got to start somewhere and just start with some kind of list and go with it. So I'm all about plans, and I'm glad I'm no longer the person who delivers them, but I have delivered many a basket I think it's a rite of passage in a marketing career. So Kalei, what are some of the campaigns that you guys have done in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I think we're all in the same place, even though we can be at different steps in the journey. So if I can piggyback off of your 7th grade science experiment, I think that's really the key foundation. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but ABM isn't a well-defined area of marketing, right? It's like where email was 20 years ago, right? We're still learning about how it can be used. So similar to what it sounds Natalie is doing, we're also in a stage where we're doing a lot of testing, right? What's working, what's not working? You know, if you want to throw that spaghetti noodle against the wall, you know, if it sticks, if it doesn't, you have to be able to have the flexibility to keep trying and to see what works. So we incorporate a lot of dimensional mail, so sending, gifting, right, on top of our ABM strategy. We have luckily found a great tool to help automate that, so we're no longer currying that around. I'm happy to talk about that as well. But we are also doing a lot of experimentation with building out, kind of end-to-end campaigns for our sales development team to be able to send out that play directly into our campaigns in market, but also doing some ad testing. So I know there are a lot of different platforms out there, but we're currently evaluating, where are ads making the biggest impact? Is it by a buying stage? Is it a buying group? Are we seeing more activity, more benefit, shortening that sales cycle from a LinkedIn perspective rather than, a GDN? So lots of testing. And I think, knowing wherever you are in your journey, being able to be comfortable with change and testing is really key where we are, as a marketing pillar with ABM.
I think that's you said it so well. Like this is the next generation of email. Like, how do we attract people? Like 20 years ago, we're like, how do we send them that email? How do we build that list? So now we've solved those problems. So we have a whole new bucket of them. But yeah. Daniel, I see your question about the new shiny tool. We are going to have a whole section on new shiny tools in a bit. So hang in there for that. And Mike has a question for you also, Natalie. He would like to know how many companies were on your original list before you split it out between half science, half pest control segment.
I'm sure Kalei can appreciate this was like one of the hardest things to do. It was like and this is like,
who are your favorite?
Right. Well, and like, this is one of the big change management. I know we have a whole section on that too, but like from change management is very different from email where you're looking at volume. So the two things that I think I want to make note on, and it, like, I'm not trying to be slippery, but like, this is like literally the answer to this can change every day. And like, that's the hard part is like, what you'll see is that you have a very small number of accounts you might be targeting at any given time. And it's usually based on budget. So it's kind of like however many accounts you want to target is directly corresponding to how much budget do you want to put into that initiative. But the hard part, like that makes sense, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, like that kind of makes sense. That correlates. The hard part is that the number of accounts, let's say it's 300. Isn't the same 300 accounts every day. It's a different set of accounts that's cycling through based on any number of pre-programmed conditions or, what they're looking at, or did they do this, but not that, or have they had somebody call them? So it is always changing. So like with account-based marketing, like I think one of the things that really sort of came to my attention is like, unlike email, where you're looking at like list size, you're instead looking at like, what's my budget for this particular initiative and how will my filters align to that? Do I need to be more filtered? Do I need to make that number smaller so that I don't get enough coverage? So that the risk is if your list is big and your budget is not, you won't cover all those accounts and then you won't see success and then you'll be wondering why it's not working. So you really do, again, like not to be slippery, but like you really have to change. And as an email geek, this was very hard for me. Like email is my baby, but like this was like a big a shift in mentality is like, you don't even think about list size. Like you're not worried about that at all. Clay, I don't know if you want to, I know you've been doing this a lot too. So I don't know if you want to tack anything onto that.
I think it's so true. And I know, man, I feel like we're going to jump back and forth because everything's intertwined. But to your point, it changes daily, right? We're looking at, what does this either customer or prospect look like today compared to what our database looks like? But what's their fit? What's their intent? What buying stage are they in? So it's just not like, oh, I've identified my, ideal prospect, which is, no simple task, right? You do that in an hour or so, right? But then it's constantly evolving. So it is being able to, narrow in, but not be narrow, right? Because it's an ever moving target.
And it's funny because if you get a tool, what you'll hear is someone will say only 300 accounts and they'll like panic because they're like, what? This isn't going to like, how is this possibly going to work? We're only targeting 300 accounts. And you have to continuously remind people who are new to the system, it's not 300 finite accounts. That is just how many you are targeting at that given moment. The accounts that you're actually targeting it could be 18,000. It just depends on how quickly they're cycling through.
No, I think that's a good tip because yeah, everyone has that, how big is your list and how many, and you're like, it's about quality and doing math and going, well, I can send it to 1,800, but they're just going to get the pack of the seeds. They're not going to get the whole damn plan. So I think that's a good way of looking at it too. Jem, for you, what are some of the tactics you see work best in this world?
Yeah, and I also want to speak to the groups that may have, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but haven't actually bought into some of this ABM software yet, right? It is an investment. I know that there's companies that are still exploring ABM. We've actually at Pearsoft been building out kind of a program from scratch a little bit, but are at the cusp now of realizing that we're seeing some returns on our ABM program. We're seeing really good conversion rates from it. And so we do want to kind of further invest in some of the intent data, providing solutions like Natalie and Calais were talking about. So I also want to kind of give hope to people out there who are like, well, I may not be able to get a huge software package ready to, approved in the budget this year, especially given what's going on in the economy. There are ways to do it, that are more manual, of course, but can start to a little bit more test out what this looks like for your ideal customer profile, how you can actually work on getting a really solid program together for ABM without having to rely so heavily on software when you're first kind of testing it out. So I would say the two things that I have started to use or have started the program with that have been very useful to us is using the Agoji sequence. I like to say that there's no problems that you're uniquely following your own, right? Other people have had the same issue and they need to figure out what's working for them. The Agoji sequence is sort of a formula-based structure of how you can reach out to your prospects and be able to reach out to them and get a better conversion rate. You can Google it. It's very simple to kind of adapt it to what you need for your ABM practice. And then the other thing I would say, and that's super important, and I know Calais and Natalie can probably speak to this as well, is response time. We actually reach and track a response time for 5 minutes or less once someone has kind of reached an engagement point. This does not mean that we have our business development reps go, hey, Tanya, I saw that you were on our website and I would like to, I would like to stalk you and tell you about these things. But what it does mean that anything from a form fill to a download to any sort of engagement that you're seeing on your website, that they are receiving some sort of email or call or something that seems very fortuitous if they happen to call around the same time. So we keep really tight metrics on response time for anybody who's showing engagement, and the type of response of that engagement depends, right? So like I said, if they're filling out a form, of course they're going to get a call. If they're filling out a form for a demo, of course we want to call them within 5 minutes. If they're downloading a piece of content, that might be a different type of response. But those are the two things that I can say have helped us in spades. And I saw the question that Beth just sent in, what's the spelling? It's called Agoji. It's AGOGE. It's a structure that you can use, that you can set up through emails, calls, and how to get in touch with your prospect base. And it just follows a very formulaic structure that you can see some better increased conversion rates. It's a start. And then what you can do is, again, keep your metrics, keep your data, see what works best, and start to kind of iterate off of that as well.
Yeah, and very cool. And Calais, what kind of tactics are you guys doing, or anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I just want to say, this is not, if you're not a data nerd, right, I will raise my hand and say that I am. If you're not, I think ABM is going to be challenging because it is about digging into the data. And, Jen, to your point, I think being able to put in, the business developer, whatever you call that area of your business, giving them the tools, but also helping lead that path, right? If you don't want them to call and follow up and say, hey, I just saw you on the website, right? Like, we all know that happens, but that's also super creepy. None of us want that call. So we do a lot of training. And again, I know we'll talk about this later as well, but really the partnership between sales and marketing, anyone, I know I see a lot of faces from the BBC group, and we had a lively email exchange about this the other week, but it's not, in my opinion, account-based marketing, right? It can't stop there. It needs to be ABX. It's really an account-based strategy. So we work hand in hand with our sales development team to, train them on the tools and the best approach to this. So we are in there, we use outreach as one of our tools for our sales dev team. So it's me taking off my marketing hat and putting on my sales hat and writing a sequence that isn't going to sound like it's coming from a machine. Natalie, I bet that, that your hair is standing on end right now because, there are some grammatical issues in there that we, are purposely putting in to make it not feel, robotic, but it really is arming the team with real tools that they can use because the reach is so far on beyond that of marketing. And it's also, in the marketing realm, we live and breathe, what we're showing as ads and why that matters in the different formats they're taking. We are super transparent with our team in showing them the ads and why we're focusing on, the particular segment and showing up those ads in the various medias so that they, it's not just them doing all the legwork, right? We've got their back to help really round out their efforts.
And I think that's kind of the theme that within the first 20 minutes we've already seen. It's a mental shift. It's a whole package. It's not just one person looking at it. You really need to have an army around you because it's a different way of doing marketing. It's not just blasting. It's not a one-way conversation of an email anymore. It could be a part of it, but that's like the blip in the big picture. So I think all of us as marketers, we have to kind of, okay, let's start small because I'm like, ooh, this could be super scary. But like, these are the pros. These are the ones who have gone through the process and have lived it from the get-go. So don't be shy if your first step is really, okay, here are 20 people and here's a plan. Let's keep that in mind because you got to start somewhere. And don't not start because this sounds scary. I think the starting small is super important. So starting small, what kind of touch points do you use, Natalie? Whether it's digital, you said you do a lot of bulk email. Tell us a little bit about what your touch points look like right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones that we focus on primarily are sort of the sales outbound, right? So sort of like the sales nurture emails, which I think Clay, you alluded to that you use a different tool than we do, but similar kind of strategy. Our marketing automation, right? Obviously is critical. Our website is, I think, as you get more into account-based marketing, your website becomes increasingly more critical to your marketing efforts. And so if you're thinking about moving to account-based marketing and your website is more of an afterthought, then do that first. Get your website buttoned up first. Because that's like one of the things that is amazing to me, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, is that it no longer matters if you have someone fill out a form because you can just send them to your website and let them dig around all day long. And in order to do that, you need to have a website that is conducive to digging. So focus on that experience as well. And then, social, both paid and organic. Those are all key components. I mean, press releases, I know, physical, I call it 3-dimensionals, 3-dimensionals would be part of it as well. And the beauty of a tool like this, the beauty of using a tool, and you can do all of this without a tool. As you remember, I said I had an intern handing out flower boxes, is that it does allow you to quickly prioritize accounts based on interest, size, demographics, firmographics, technographics. So, it does give you a better sense of who's the right person or who's the right account to invest more money in versus ones that maybe have less propensity or are not the quite right size. But yeah, I mean, and sitting on top of all of that is reporting. Reporting, I think, is critical, not just on how's the success of my campaign, but who should I actually be targeting? Because what I think you'll find is that the data you have in your CRM may not look the way that you think it should. And so we actually have a lot of conversations around, do we have enough of the type of account that we want already, and thus can spend our energy and investment and time on pushing more of those accounts through the funnel, which is a better return on investment because they already have brand awareness, or, oh, hey, do we have a gap in this area of high quality accounts that we need to actually go spend some time and energy and investment doing some outbound prospecting or running some more net new type campaigns through, whatever channels we choose. So we very much tried to spend a lot of time looking at like, what does the data tell us already about the accounts we have? And do we need to spend money to go acquire them, or do we already have them and we just need to nurture them through?
I don't know. I think that's the basis to marketing, but we forget it so quickly too. But if okay, let's look what we have already. And like before we start going to buy a new list or go out and buy something new or spend money on it, on a new campaign. Kalei, what are some of the touch points you guys do? You said you did like a lot of bulky stuff as well. Anything else?
Yeah, so I think it's really similar. Of course, we've got the digital, the display, the paid social, heavy for email, right? The cost of that is a lot more palatable. We do, the lumpy mailer, the dimensional mailers. We really target those at the right contact, though, right? Because Natalie and everyone on this call, I'm sure, can agree that another mind shift when it comes to ABM is that, it's an outbound motion. These aren't hand raisers. So, once you have the account, that's great. But then you have to build out that buying committee, right? And we're currently seeing an average buying committee of 6 to 10 people making a purchasing decision. And in the current economic environment that we're in, that's only trending to grow larger. So it's building out those contacts that you have, within an organization. And we've talked about websites. And if you saw me reach to the side, this is another big topic about ABM, right? And we actually don't gate when it comes to our ABM efforts, because at the end of the day, we know who they are. So we do not have any form fills, and that is a big pivot as well, which is why we task the team so much in building out that buying committee so that they can be, reaching out to the known members. Of course, our 6 Sense platform, we're able to target kind of the unknown buying committee within those accounts. And then we're sending those, high dollar, high value dimensional mailers to, the gatekeeper or the decision maker within those accounts that, are the top of the top, because of course we've got, a large target, but we really want to put our money where those biggest needle movers are going to be from the physical component of mailing.
No, super exciting, super cool. And I think now we all want to know, like, so how do they do it? How do you choose? And have a million other questions. But first, we're just going to have a quick commercial break, a word from our sponsor. Thank you again to Marketing Copilot for sponsoring the session. What they do is they help technology companies build sales funnels that launch into sales. They have a proven methodology to help drive more leads at a lower cost and ensure that these leads aren't mismanaged, and ultimately help grow your revenue. So thank you again. If you need any help with that, please give them a call and they can help you on your journey, because all of us need a little help sometimes, and that's why we're here on the call today as well. So thank you. And now we are going to get to all the burning questions of okay, we'll get to that later. We'll get to that later. Now we're getting into the crux of it. So how do we get started? Jem, how do you decide on which accounts to target? We talked a little bit about it before, but now let's deep dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have intent software, it makes it a lot easier to find who you want to target, because they are, while they have not maybe physically told you that they're raising their hand, hello, our house is on fire, we need help. Their activities and their behavior and their digital footprint is basically alluding to that, right? If you don't have that intent software, like we do not yet, but are looking at it, we have to do a couple different things. So a lot of it is for us as an ISV, we look at technographic data, right? Our software integrates with a specific set of ERP solutions. So we know that that is a huge, win off the top. If we know that they're a GP user, Business Central or Sage Intact or any of the other ERPs that we are integrated within, That's a great, check mark in our book. I don't know about you guys, but I get about 42 emails a day from people asking me if I want to buy lists of their data lists of XYZ users. And the answer is always no, they're always crap. So don't do that. But you can work with a few other data providers, and I can help you with that if you need it. But how we choose and decide on which accounts to target, obviously technographic for us is a huge piece there. Just as Natalie and Calais were alluding to as well, which of the people on your buyer journey are going to be involved is also critical. The third thing that we do is obviously look at what deals have we closed? Where are we finding the best wins? What does that look like? Again, reporting and metrics is super important, but it also kind of takes, it can be a huge advantage if you actually just go to the other end of the funnel and say like, we've brought you 100 different leads of 100 different groups, but which group is actually closing at a really solid rate? Where do we want to really put our investment and our money towards in that area? One of the things on the opposite side of it is, where are we seeing some roadblocks, right? I can share a recent example of we were actually getting stuck at the IT, kind of questionnaire section where everybody was super on board, everybody was super excited about it, but for some reason the IT director who had never heard of the software wants to make sure that it's going to integrate, correctly with their ERP and all of these things. It's just like, well, I don't know what's going on. I don't want this, what this is going to cause, a huge issue. Maybe I don't want to be a part of it. And what we found out was a little thing we like to call marketing inception, which is if you actually just put out some display ads to those IT directors, to those groups, that just talks about how your company is the most trusted, how you've actually been, working with IT, and you understand kind of the importance of their role and how we can help, without even speaking to that person, just from passive display ads, just from things through LinkedIn, just from things through social media. You can actually get their buy-in a lot quicker if you're noticing that there are some roadblocks in that buying process. So the areas of being able to kind of slightly influence people just through almost like, I wouldn't say it's subliminal messaging because it is obvious messaging, right? But you can actually take a look at your metrics to say, where are these things that we're seeing opportunities for us to smooth out that buying process, and which groups of our set, ideal customer profile or total addressable market are available for us to be able to make some good and easy to, easier wins here. And that's how we can kind of go after who we need to target by priority, basically. Does that make sense? Oh, Natalie, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was reading Newt's note to you about how you're tracking slightly influenced. And I was like, I want to know the answer to that as well, because I think sometimes it's very difficult to track the difference between I generated this and I influenced it, because a lot of our systems are just not set up that way. So perhaps we can come back to that. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of deciding on what accounts to target, I think CBiz is unique in that we have well, maybe we're not unique, but we have many different buyers, right? And it really depends on like what they're in the market for. As I mentioned before, like just at like the top level, we have a whole suite of financial services, accounting, tax, audit, advisory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's a huge chunk of our business. All of those are different situations. And in general, like the target audience for that is like very different from our talent and compensation division. And like in certain circumstances, like some of the service lines have a really good high propensity to work together. We have employee benefits consulting. We also have human capital management software, right? Oh, those two things go really nicely together. So it's really interesting, like as we sit down to talk about like what is our decision on what accounts to target. We have to sort of both factor like what works for that very specific service line and like what is like their ideal buyer. But we also, because we have so many services, like, cross-serve is important to us. And so we also have to think about like what works for them, but also like what makes a good CBiz customer. And that can be sort of a delicate balance. And I think it takes a lot of conversation. And I think it takes a lot of bringing in the sales team and saying like, hey, when we hand off things to you, what do you think about them? Are these good? Like, how do you, like, are they good leads? Are they like things that you don't want to follow up on? I think if you're ever going to ask a sales team to follow up on opportunities where people aren't implicitly raising their hands, which is what you're doing in account-based marketing, like you want to make sure there's like value at the end of that tunnel for them. They're going to go down that rabbit hole and trace down that account. Like it's got to be worth it. So I think that, making sure that you're in like the Goldilocks zone of targeting is like where I would like ask you to go, because in my experience as a marketer, I've hit both directions poorly. I've done it the wrong way in several situations, right? Where I've been like, oh, okay, well, we can go after these. They're not very expensive for us to acquire, but they're too small. And we can get them in handfuls. But then you hit like the service side, and service is like, I can't deal with these. They're not a fit. Sales is like, I barely made any money off of them. And now you've devalued yourself as a marketer. If you go to the other side, then you've devalued yourself as a marketer because sales goes in and says, I can't sell to this account. I'm up against like my top competitor can't do this. Like, there's no way I could sell this message, right? And so I think you have to like be very tightly aligned with like, what does sales want to sell to? Because if you get it wrong, you're going to have a really tough time selling your value as a marketer. And that is like, it can't be something that marketing is doing in a vacuum. It cannot be marketing sitting over here thinking like, well, I really feel like these accounts are great because I just, want to target stuff in Kansas City. Okay, but like, what's going to happen to it on the back end of that? And that's the question you need to ask yourself as you think about like, what is my right target list? What's going to happen to them? Is the sales team going to be happy with me? Is the sales team going to be frustrated with me? Are these things that have a high tendency for cross serve? And really make sure you align on all those data points, especially because an account-based marketing strategy will give you access to data points that you never even thought to dream of. And you need to know what it is you want to do with them.
No, it's super good points. I'm like, I just saw the time and I'm like, oh, holy smokes, we still have a lot of questions to go through. So that was my deer in headlights look to, okay, how do we get to the next question on budget? So how much does this all cost? Like, we're talking about lists and moving and all these pieces. So Jen, why don't you start off? Where do you look?
Yes, I hate to say it depends, right? But we have, an ABM team that we've kind of sourced and kind of built out. So we have 3 business development reps who are solely working on our outbound practices, right? So that's headcount right there, plus a demand gen, manager. These are the people who are keeping the metrics for you, who are doing all the reporting, who are showing you on top of reaching out to these groups, right? As Kalei put so eloquently earlier, and I always think of this as an inbound lead is somebody who's saying, hello, I know that my house is on fire and I need help. Sales reps want to sell to those people all day long because they know that they have a problem and they're excited to get some help. Outbound is a totally different world where they're like, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, but my house is, part of it might be on fire, but I don't really know. Do I really have a problem? What do I need to do here? So this group of people from a headcount perspective is important. I would say also, in addition to that, you have your software costs, right? So in addition to our normal tech stack, we use HubSpot, we use Salesforce, and then we use Outreach, which I believe Kalei also mentioned, which is our automated email system. So based on behaviors, based on things, it's triggered to send out certain sequences, like an Agoji sequence that can send out different versions to our prospect list. And then in addition to that, you could also, then we run our calls through Outreach too, which I could go on a whole tangent about calls, but that's a whole different call. That's a whole different webinar. I think the other piece is, if you are looking at intent data, there's a whole bunch of them that Natalie, it sounds like, has evaluated all of them in the past year. That's going to be an additional cost anywhere from sometimes $30,000 to $60,000 a year on top of everything, right? I think that budget makes a lot of people who are not familiar with ABM practices kind of squirm, because the costs can add up quickly. But I think once, as we're talking about too, once you realize that you can see and close deals at such and shorten that sales cycle at such a rapid rate, you are going to get your value if you have set up everything properly. If you have that foundational, kind of structure of a marketing practice in place, you are absolutely going to make your money back in spades. And so for us, that's also part of the cost that we kind of determine. And then otherwise, like the budget is generally, what we like to say is, we have a little bit of a formula that goes into it. So whatever your ACV value is, your annual contract value, we kind of multiply that by your close rate. So once you kind of have your initial discovery, or whatever you guys call it in your sales world, if you multiply it by that close rate, that percentage should give you basically an acceptable cost per lead, acceptable kind of cost for that disco. So I'll put the formula in here. It may make sense for some of you, just depending on how your business structure is made up. It could be completely random for our company, but that's kind of one of the things that we use to kind of determine the acceptable cost per lead there, and how much we're willing to spend from an ABM perspective. Natalie, I think you can probably add on to some of that too, just from the overall budget that you see.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you decide to go software route and you want to buy a piece of software, I think a lot of companies have a metric in place which is their expectation of like, hey, if I spend X amount of dollars, how much do I expect it to return on a percentage base? If your company does not have that, I would encourage you to have that conversation. And then I think that the other part is like, yes, 100% agree with you, Jim, on like how to calculate budget for a specific ABM campaign. Like the two things that I would encourage everyone to also think about is like, do you want to have something that's evergreen, that's always on? Probably. And what is the value for you to that? And then I think the other part of it is like, how are you going to track that return on investment? And like, that's the hard part about account-based marketing, not because it's not there, it 100% is, but because the way that you're tracking it is so different from what you've probably been doing with your landing pages and your lead generation. So with lead generation, it's like pretty easy to tie, like you converted on this white paper and now the opportunity shall get calculated to the white paper. And like, oh, look, we returned, X amount of dollars on this white paper campaign. Account-based marketing is very different from that, which is exactly why, toward the beginning of the call, we were talking about campaigns. Like, this is exactly why, like running a pilot that's like, hey, what's the control group versus the targeted group, I think is critical. And like, that's not, I wish I could say that I was like so smart and that was my idea. It wasn't. That was like the person that we were working with at the software tool we picked was like, hey, like you should do this. This is a smart idea. And I was like, that is a smart idea. So, but I mean, it makes sense because the metrics are so different. Not only are you trying to retrain your marketing team on a different set of metrics, which is like influence, but you're also trying to train your sales team, your CMO, your overall leadership on like, hey, we're like tracking things slightly differently. And that's not to say you shouldn't continue to track things the way that you are, but when you talk about return on investment, now you're sort of dealing with two metrics. And there is a little bit, I mean, not going to lie, there's a little bit of a hurdle to figure out how do I integrate these two metrics together into my existing reporting ecosystem such that like I'm doing as little disruption to the people we're reporting to, which is usually sales and leadership, as possible. So it does take a little bit of like digging in and I think asking others who've done it before you. I mean, I spent tons of time just asking others, hey, how did you do this? How did you have this conversation? What did the change management look like? How are you reporting on ROI? Because that is ultimately the question. How are you reporting on ROI? It doesn't matter how much money you're spending if you can't report on its return, which is how I time that back to like, budget. Like you can spend as much money or as little money as you want. You just have to know how to return it.
And I always, just to piggyback, I think, the three of us might be way down the field for some of the people that are on this call or who are thinking about ABM, who have toyed around with it a little bit. You can scale it back, right? There is a world in which you can scale it back and start small and start to work on iterative, kind of process flows and build out those metrics and do a little bit more manual work. Like it can be done. And so, I don't want to discourage people from thinking like, well, if I'm going to do this right, I have to have X, Y, and Z in this software in this budget and, hundreds of thousands of dollars of overhead. And it's just it's not the case, but that's where you can be in a few years. If you grow out your ABM practice, you can actually see quite a difference in the leads and lead gen that you're able to bring to your company.
So I'm going to add one more thing to that, because like one of the things, like, if you don't mind. So I think like one of the interesting things about ABM is that it's actually going to help you capture opportunities that you're currently missing in your existing strategy. So like, for example, if you are running display advertising and you're doing it through Google, or maybe you have an agency that's running programmatic, however far you're down the pipeline on that, it's still only telling you when somebody clicks on an ad, converts on said asset, becomes a lead, turns into an opportunity. You are missing all of the other account people. You are missing anyone who saw your ad and then went to your website and converted on the contact us form, which is like maddening that happens. But the truth is that the average display, what is the metric now, Calais? It's like 0.5% is like 0.2 to 0.5% is like the average click-through rate on a display ad. And that's not to say that they don't work. Did I get that number right? Is that what you would deal with too?
I was going to say it's right around there, and yeah, keep going, because then I think I'm just going to tack on to the end of that.
Yeah, right.
We
so
call
like
it the ripple effect, right? Where
right.
It's like can't actually point to it, but it's happening.
Exactly. And so that is the thing about where we are right now in marketing is if you are in that spot, you are missing attribution that you deserve credit for because you don't have a way to capture it. And what your team is looking at is, and I've heard this happen. Remember I said I worked at an agency. Oh, nobody converted on that ad. So the ad's not working. And I'm like, how could you possibly know? We can't know. So Kalei, go ahead, tack onto that. I'm sure you have more to say.
You know, it was like a perfect setup, and this was not rehearsed, which I love. But it's like, if we thought click-through rates were challenging, right? Like, welcome to the world of view-through rates, right? That's a whole nother thing, a whole nother game. And it's so true. And, you know, what we've been talking about for the bulk of this call is, you know, the acquisition of a new client. But Natalie, to your point, and what are you missing is the frightening part about ABM, because it's just not, you know, from a prospecting perspective. Like, look at your open opportunities. What if you knew what your currently engaged opportunities were looking at from either competitive or, you know, even searching for products that you offer, but they might not be aware of. And then, you know, talk about customer retention. Again, the new environment that we're entering, you know, yes, I know I'm tagged to, you know, to new business, but, you know, it's equally as important, especially in this environment, to retain the clients that you have. So being able to get that intel, you know, because, you know, what are your marketing efforts to your existing base? Like, are you tracking their, you know, their ad engagement, their keyword search? ABM is, you know, kind of an end-to-end all business strategy perspective that I really feel, you know, everyone needs to get on board with.
So when you're talking this end-to-end business strategy, Kalei, how do you have a time frame, or do you have cycles? I know it'll depend on a whole lot of different metrics and things that you've calculated, but do you have a rule of thumb of what does one look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, we like to have an evergreen, you know, campaign running, right? I think there's a brand, a problem, a solution awareness perspective that we constantly, you know, need to have available. But we also, I'm sorry, I have to giggle at the chats as they come through. Yes, it's never ending. But no, we have made the pivot within the last, you know, 9 months to really focus our efforts to have more of an industry messaging, right? We did a lot of focus. We originally started out, I'll show the cards here, right? From a connector perspective, we've pivoted to industry specific. So to let you know, I've built, you know, high priority and nurture paths through outreach for all of our core industries. Those I completely redo every 6 months, but I do a deep dive in those every 2 weeks to see what the performance metrics are. If we're having success with a different email heading or a call to action, do people like video over a case study? Do they want a video case study versus a written case study? What does that look like? So the kind of the multi-layer, and then if we look at that dimensional, that gifting, that sending perspective, which we use Sendoso for, can't speak highly enough about them as a gifting platform. But we launch a new gifting program about every quarter. So of course, there's going to be a tie-in to, you know, what we're promoting from an evergreen and then in those industry specific focuses. But that's where we really align from a timeline perspective. But yeah, I mean, the campaign is really, you know, never ending, right? Especially with people going in and out of buying stages and intent fits.
I don't know, I think that's what we have to like keep that in mind, that we're just adapting, but keep being timely about how often we look at things is important. Just don't evergreen set it and forget it, because that could be the bane of not existence as well. So Natalie, we only have 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
I was reminded that we haven't said which tool you use yet, so please talk about it. Talk about your experience. I think you set us up at the beginning of the hour. I have pulled people long enough. Go for it.
I mean, I looked at a lot of different ones. You know, I think I tried to be really thorough and finding one that I really liked. My favorite was demand based. I felt like they also had the best community, but there are a lot of really good ones out there. And it really like kind of boils down to like, what is it that you want to use it for? I know some are more intent heavy and less advertising heavy. Some are more advertising heavy and less intent heavy. Some don't integrate as closely to your data set as others do. Some are better at capturing unknown data. So, I mean, it's really kind of all over it. You really kind of have to go down that road and figure out like which one works best for you. I mean, I think that like, just as we talk about like campaign duration, I was thinking a little bit about like another way to look at that. Yes, it's always going on, but like the beauty of a tool is that it's pre-programmed to move people through the journey and you don't have to stop. Like if I were doing a LinkedIn ad, I'd have to stop and be like, okay, how many people turn in an opportunity? How many people converted? All right, remove them. Now I got to pull these new people in. I'm going to pull this from over here. And like, did they actually see the ad and convert? No. Okay. Well, LinkedIn says I spent literally LinkedIn will sometimes be like, you spent $5,000 for a lead. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, I mean, not to like bash LinkedIn ads. Like I'm sure the attribution is there in unseen ways, but like, you know, it's definitely, when you think about the limitations of, you know, like email addresses, oh my gosh, like raise your hand if you've ever tried to run a list into like, you know, LinkedIn and the match rates are low because like so many people don't use their corporate email address to log into LinkedIn, but that's the email address you have because you're a B2B marketer. And then like
after it takes like 3 days for LinkedIn to upload the campaign, and you're like, how does it take this long?
Right. And the match rates are like ridiculous. And it's like, well, because everybody's logged in with their Gmail address. I mean, it's like, it's very challenging. Same with like display advertising. Like you have to have like a minimum threshold of advertising that you're spending with Google. And then in addition to that, like you have to have like 1,000 accounts that'll match. And I mean, it's like, it's just the problems that it solves to have a software tool. I really would say like, I feel like we are in a spot right now where 10 years ago, email was where, everybody was like, you got to get a marketing automation platform. You got to get it. You got to do this. Like it's critical to your email. And, you know, it was like just starting to see like that like high level of adoption. I feel like we're like right there right now where ask me again in like 5 years and it's probably going to be like, can you imagine if somebody said right now, like, oh no, I don't do email. People would be like, what? You mean you don't do email, right? Like I have a feeling we will get there with account-based marketing as well, especially in B2B. Maybe not B2C, obviously that would be tricky, but in B2B, I think we'll get there.
I hope one of your Humans of Email podcasts will address this particular subject in season 2. I will be anxiously awaiting that. Okay, I'm seeing the time tick by. Loving this conversation. We will probably have to do a part 2, warning you all now for that. But one piece of advice that you have that you wish you knew when you started this, Jem, take us home. What would you wish if you can go back in time?
That is a really good question. I think, as I've been saying all along, I think Natalie, you know, we're evaluating role works just based on the needs that we have and things that we're looking at for our company. But for this intent data, I think the advice that I have is, again, depending on where you are in your company, if you can't justify the cost for one of these, you know, softwares or things that you have, use the existing tech stack that you have to be able to, you know, kind of home grow it a little bit, because the process in which that you're going to build this out is actually going to set you up for success in the future. If you can't justify the spend now, building out your own practices and your own best practices or your own process flow and best practices around ABM are actually going to give you a much better understanding of how your customer actually interacts with your website, with your emails, with your calls, with the things that you're looking at. All of that data, even though it's going to be manual, is going to help you as you build out, you know, and grow your ABM practice. And I would say just be patient with it. Keep very, very detailed metrics and really start small with the goals that you're trying to accomplish. Like I said, 5 minutes to response, get that down pat. You know, like it does not have to be these huge swings. It can be get your open rates from whatever, you know, just start to benchmark everything that you're doing around it to try and open up those levels of engagement. And don't be afraid of a negative response too. You know, a lot of times we send out like a joke kind of email like, oh, did a polar bear eat you? And that's why you haven't responded to our email. We get really hysterical responses to that email and it really pisses some people off. But as I always say, like any response is a good response because they're showing engagement. That still is going to give you a response or an ability for your business development rep to say like, hey, I'm so sorry if this made you mad. We were just joking around. I hope you're having a good day. Would love to talk with you. Like any response is a good response, kind of like the old saying of any press is good press, right? I think you're always going to want to keep an eye on, you know, how people are engaging with your content, keeping notes on that because it is going to set you up for success as you grow out your ABM practice. Natalie, do you want to kind of dovetail with that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the risk with ABM is the email marketers risk, which again, email geek right here, right? This is like the hardest part for me to wrap my head around is like, we are trained to think about like, oh, hey, like I've got this big group of people, I want to convert them all. And it's hard to like retrain. And like we went through this recently, probably about 5 years ago with email too, where it was like, hey, don't go for volume, go for quality, right? Like if they're not engaged, like you don't have to continue on. And I know there are email geeks here as well. There are hot conversations in the email geek community about like what you do with unengaged email subscribers. Here's the thing that I love about this though, is like, because email is free, and because a lot of companies have used it so liberally because it's free and because it works and because it's a high return channel, there's a lot of email oversaturation in the B2B community. And like this gives you an opportunity to still target the accounts that you know you want, to still keep an eyeball on the accounts that you know are going to turn at some point without having to over email them. You don't have to email them every single time you have a new white paper. Like you can put up a display campaign to the same list and like, they'll still see it, you know, and if they convert, great. But if they don't, it's not another email in their inbox that they have to go delete. So it's definitely a way I think to maintain, and I worry about this a lot as an email geek, is like, how do you maintain the value of email? Because we have been so and by we, I mean like B2B marketers have overemphasized it as a channel because it's free and because there's been a lot of pressure for us to do a lot of it. And now I think the privacy landscape has like taken a hit on us because we were not judicious about our email practices. And I think it's like, we're suffering the consequences of our actions. And I think demand-based is a way to start to repair that relationship without having to send yet another email.
And I can confirm, I have my own metrics that show the more that my BDRs have emailed, it actually does not deliver better results. It slightly tanks it. So always a good thing to focus on quality over quantity.
All right. And Khalid, do you have any last minute things before we close up the session?
No, I think everyone's talked, to it. And Jem, I just want to like kind of double click on what you said. Everyone has to start somewhere, right? If you're not at the place to make a buying, decision on a software, whether it be demand-based, 6 Sense, any other variety of tools out there, you can farm a lot of this within your existing database, right? And if you're looking to make a purchase down the road, is it next year? Is it the year after? There's a lot of initiative you can take right now to start identifying what you want, like what's important to you, what data matters, and getting buy-in outside of the marketing team to, set the groundwork for a successful, I'm going to call it ABX, account-based everything, right? You got to build out that strategy across your business. So if you're not ready to sign on the dotted line, that doesn't mean you're not ready for an ABM strategy.
Well said. My Teams was going crazy there for a second, and I'm like, stop. And it's like, anyway, I think that means it's
so excited about all this conversation about ABX. That's why.
Exactly. It was like, call us now. All right. On that note, I think we're going to say thank you so much. Please continue this conversation. You know where to find us. If you have any ideas for future sessions, please write out. If you've missed a session for a good or bad reason, I don't judge, only slightly. Check out our Channel Academy website. They are all posted there. Sharing is caring. If there's someone else on your team who you think should be watching these videos or learning from it, and you've been selected as the guinea pig, forward it on. We're here to build this community. In the future, if you want to sponsor a future one, we are always welcome to new sponsorships. If you want to be a panelist, if you have any ideas, if you want to start a book club, Calais, I saw that you had a book up there. I am trying to find someone who is willing to be our ringleader for that. By all means, we are trying to build this community one marketer at a time. So thank you again, and have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, and thank you, Tanya, for being our MC du jour. We appreciate it.
Dana White is always here for you guys. So thank
Love
you
it.
again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.